The year is 1984, and we follow Alex Rogan, a small-time teenager who discovers that his exceptional skills at his Starfighter arcade game are actually a test designed to recruit real pilots for an interstellar war. Transported into space by the charming huckster Centauri, Alex must quickly adapt from gamer to hero as he joins a rebellion against the tyrannical Kodan Empire. The film is known for its early use of computer-generated imagery, which was groundbreaking at the time and helped visualize epic space battles in a brand new way. Beyond its technical achievements, the movie resonates because of its theme that ordinary people can rise to extraordinary challenges. Its mix of humor, heart, and imaginative world-building has earned its lasting appeal among science fiction fans. This week on Back to the Balcony, we cover The Last Starfighter. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, two titans of cinematic review. Sometimes right, sometimes wrong, but always captivating. Your hosts Antonio of the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and Justin Henson of the Movie Wire are here to take you back to the balcony. Okay, so I would say Beastmaster, The Dark Crystal, Never-Ending Story, The Last Starfighter. What is, or what are, films that were on TNT, TBS, WGN all throughout the 90s and late 80s for us growing up watching these movies over and over again. I was too young to see this in the theater, but I saw it at least a dozen times on TV before I ever owned it on any kind of physical media. It was just always on. And for our generation, the arcade generation, the cable TV generation, it was pretty much like a staple for us. And that movie that was like, oh, if I could only be The Last Starfighter. What if that quarter I put in the arcade machine actually was a test to see if I was worthy of fighting an intergalactic civil war? It's just one of the best sci-fi stories out there for kids of our generation. Now, were people younger than us, let's say younger millennials and Gen Zs get it? Maybe if it was a different type of story, a different type of game, maybe like an interactive mobile phone game or some kind of multiplayer online experience. But for us, the arcade generation, this movie really hit, as well as the computer graphics, as well as its Star Wars light thematic. It's just a movie that always grabbed me. And a couple years ago, I screened this and Tron together for one of my birthday party movie nights. And people that hadn't seen it in years still loved it, and people who saw it for the first time at least appreciated what it was doing. And our critics, I was really surprised to see the flip-flop of appreciation that this movie had with our two critics, and I can't wait to talk about that. But before we do all that, Justin Henson, what is your experience? What is your life story with The Last Starfighter? Was this something that was, I don't know, macaroni and cheese to you growing up, just comfort food? Or is this something that you caught on later in life?
You're playing the proper notes here with me because I didn't see this in theaters either. This was either a TNT, USA, whatever network was playing it over and over again. And, after the rewatch, I haven't seen this in years, but it made me sad. It really did. And the reason it made me sad, and you touched on it, is back then in the good old days of cinema, we had variety. We had ones for kids, we had some for teenagers, we had some for families, we had some for adults. And this movie resonated with me. And I think watching it now with a younger generation, there can be an appreciation for it, but nothing close to how we probably felt about it, because this is simplistic storytelling at its finest when it comes to resonating with a teenage audience and you said it brilliantly, what if I was the next Starfighter? We have a lot of elements here that just kept it simple. You do have familiar tones in this movie. It's almost a copy and paste, but dumbed down so we can put ourselves in the shoes of the character of Alex. And that's what I appreciated about this. I watched it twice this week, and every single time, it's so simplistic. I don't have to think about it. I can just like what I'm seeing on screen. I can like the simplicity. I don't have to get to know Alex on a deeper level because the setting is telling us all we need to know. And when we get into space, it's all the counterpart characters are really adding to the adventure element of the what if. So to me, this is a lost art form, even though back then it was probably just let's push it to the screen. Video games are big, sci-fi is big, let's make a buck. But there's no way they would have known where this movie would have been now in an appreciation aspect of not getting the variety we get with movies today.
I agree with that 100%. And, it does do the hero's journey, which I'm totally fine with. We have a hero from humble beginnings, a trailer park. And I feel like in the 80s, let's say, I'm not going to say like trailer park families, but lower income, lower middle class families, that really was an excellent way to get people to appreciate your film. The 80s were kind of like a time of opulence for America, right? Like, even if you were lower middle class, you kind of felt like you could still do stuff. But look at the Goonies, right? That's kind of class warfare. If you look at movies like Real Genius and The Explorers, they're all like lower middle class kids. Gremlins, we've covered Gremlins on the show. Lower middle class people that face extraordinary odds. And this is something that I really think is done in an excellent way. The fact that Alex and his little brother live in a trailer park, and you really see like this trailer park community, and he is envious and a little pissed off that, everyone's going to fancy colleges and he's applying for city college. It's a very Frank Capra trope, if you will, right? And I really love that. And then Catherine Mary Stewart as Laurie is the girlfriend or girlfriend to be. She's kind of in the same boat. She lives with her grandmother in this trailer park. She doesn't have much of a future, but because she's a beautiful woman, she can hang out with these kids and feel like a part of the it crowd, and he's never going to quite get there. That's so relatable on so many levels, even if we didn't grow up in a trailer park. Just that feeling of not belonging and then being expressed into an intergalactic hero. Like, that really makes the hero's journey even that much better. And Lance Guest, man, he plays that so well in that character. He doesn't play it like in a whiny, smarmy way that Luke Skywalker is in the first movie, right? Like, we're not annoyed with this kid. We get him. He stands up for himself, but you see the frustration in his face. But also, like, the fact that the community gathers around him when he beats the game. Like, that's a great scene, too. There's just so many triumphant moments for the little guy, for the underdog in this movie, which really makes me appreciate it more and more in this realm of science fiction fantasy of the 1980s. That hero's journey really works, especially with this teenage character.
Well, it just doesn't go in on the hero's journey. It's a subtlety because even when we get the first act, we have this community. And if it was any other movie today, they would have treated this setting as grim, the woe is me, take even Spielberg's Ready or Not, where we have this grim kind of setting of the underdog has to overcome where he's coming from. This is never shoving it in your face. This is all about community. And you can tell this was meant for teenagers to tell a message because the whole focal point from the first act to the climax, we see that community come together in the end and root this kid on. If this was a kid excelling at school, going to college, that same community would have the same reaction. It doesn't matter if there's a spaceship coming down. This community is here to root on Alex, on his successes. And I think that is the pivotal point of what separates this movie from any other trope that we see today, or even coming out of the 80s or 90s, that it ties it together. And even though it's a little cheeky towards the end, where it's a little over the top, that's okay because it's a celebration, and celebrations are supposed to be kind of over the top, tongue in cheek. Let's just take it all in. It earned the right to be cheesy. And that's what I really loved about this movie. It never takes itself seriously. It really does have this world from the trailer park to the universe to the spaceship car. There's all these elements here to say we are going to target teenagers because the message of community is more important than trying to impress you with special effects or a point of a story. It's not there to impress. It's there to entertain and tell a subtle message.
So I'm glad that you kind of talked about all that stuff, because what I think really hit me in the 80s and what probably hit a lot of people our age is the fact that in the 80s, we didn't really see a lot of sci-fi stuff that would eventually make its way into normal life. Like technology was still kind of experimental, right? We were still excited by new things. Nowadays, we see a new gadget and we're like, oh, that's all it does. But in the 80s, the fact that Centauri, played by the magnificent Robert Preston, Henry Hill from The Music Man, when he shows up in that space car was like the coolest thing we'd ever seen when this movie came out, right? And even though today the special effects that were computer generated of pretty much anything in outer space, it seems so rudimentary now, but back then that was cool as shit because we knew that they weren't models. Like, wow, computers did this. Those aren't real. They're not cartoons. That's like computer imagery. We were so impressed by it. I still kind of am now. It looks pretty good for 1984, in my opinion. Obviously, it's CG, but it's supposed to feel that way. It's supposed to feel otherworldly. And I also love the fact that while we are creating creatures here that are very reminiscent of, let's say, like 1950s and 60s aliens. For example, the Rylos Empire. They look like the aliens from this island Earth, right? They have like the big foreheads and the white hair. I think it's a throwback to that. What I like about it is that it tries to differentiate itself from Star Wars aliens and from Star Trek aliens and kind of do something a little bit on its own. It's somewhere in between. And I think that's great because you can't be a 1980 sci-fi movie without feeling like a Star Wars ripoff, but I feel like this one tried to at least give it some respect, right? It's like, hey, we can't make a movie with aliens and not be compared to Star Wars or Star Trek, but it still has this uniquity to it. I don't know what it is. It doesn't feel like a blatant ripoff. Maybe it is the fact that the characters are all so lifelike, that there's energy behind them. There's energy through the makeup, especially with Daniel Hurley. Like, having him play the mentor, I think is really important because not a lot of actors like to get behind makeup because they're afraid it's going to ruin their face and ruin their performance. Yet, just like Peter Weller in RoboCop or Hugo Weaving in V for Vendetta, the performance is so good, it doesn't matter what the makeup does. It penetrates the screen through the prosthetics. That really adds to the movie's credibility. So yeah, I think that's another thing that separates this from the Star Wars, Star Trek empire, is that this did feel real, emotional, and it grabbed the audience.
I think where it gets it right is every character adds personality. And I'll even go as bold to say that Alex isn't the most memorable character. He's linear. I'm not a huge fan of him in the movie. He is a vehicle for every other character because every other alien in the movie has their own personality trait. They have their own motive. They have their own kind of characteristic that we feel empathy towards. Like when we have Preston's character, I almost want a spin-off movie of him of how he's recruiting.
I know, right?
He is a brilliant character. And by the time, spoiler alert, he gets shot, I felt for that. And he still has that bravery to take this last starfighter back home. And you can tell there is kind of a motive to it in the beginning of him recruiting Alex, but we don't focus too much on it. The movie never has a pivotal focus on motive. It just goes forth and relies on personalities of the characters. And that's what I really like. I mean, when we have that scene where we have Centauri on Earth with Alex and his beta, and we have the beta Alex just giving facial expressions in agreement of encouragement that he should do this, that's not a needed trait, but it adds on top of the stakes. It adds on top of the emotional feel to really tell Alex to go do it. In my first rewatch of it, I almost was nodding along with the beta saying go, even though I knew what the outcome was. So I think a lot of the performances here are really well done to really add that element to lead to an earned climax of rooting for Alex, celebrating Alex, and hoping for the best. Even though you know what the outcome's going to be, you're still rooting for the big battle for Alex's success.
See, I think that's where Lance Guest actually deserves a lot more credit as an actor. The fact that he does play two characters in this. He plays himself, and then he plays the beta version of himself, which is essentially an android that Centauri leaves behind so people don't realize that the real Alex is actually on Rylos defending them. That's a great nuanced character because it's a character that has the very base mannerisms of Alex from the physical touch, right? but he has to like learn quickly who people are, what the environment is, and how to be convincing that he is not just a robot. I actually love all of the beta scenes, and I kind of wish that there was more of them. And that's a brilliant part of the screenwriter and the director to actually like take that break from the adventure side of the story and spend a good 20 minutes back on Earth learning what the family's doing, learning what Catherine Mary Stewart's doing. And this is where I think the movie gets really interesting. So it was directed by Nick Castle, right? Nick Castle went on to direct some really fun movies. The Boy Who Could Fly, Tap, which is on the list. Like, I love Tap. Major Pain, Dennis the Menace, right? Like, he's definitely a genre filmmaker, and he knows what he's doing in his own personal realm of filmmaking. But half of this movie to me feels like a John Carpenter movie. The whole time that we're back on Earth with Alex's beta, we have the Zandozan, the intergalactic bounty hunter with like the monster face, right? When I was a kid, that scared the shit out of me. That feels so John Carpenter-esque that like the horror element of John Carpenter leaches its way into this movie. And I feel the reason why is because Nick Castle was John Carpenter's like silent partner. He helped co-write Escape from New York. He was the original Michael Myers shape in the first one. So I feel like he learned a lot from Carpenter behind the camera, and he brings it to this movie, where at least half this movie, I'm like, this could have been a John Carpenter film, 100%. Mostly the Earth stuff. And I love it. I love it so much because we do see a filmmaker who feels comfortable doing different styles of filmmaking. He's feeling comfortable with his horror elements, the sci-fi elements, the drama, but there's also a lot of comedy. I think Nick Castle is a very talented guy, and this was like, you know, one of his very first films to prove it. So I think this movie, with any other director, wouldn't have been as fun as it is.
I think I'm going to go the opposite route to you, honestly. I think what Castle does, and it crescendos in his resume, is he recognizes innocence and youth. And I think this was the seedling to that, of really going with that adventure story. But then we lead into whatever your opinion is or not, if it's a good film or not. But then we get into Dennis the Menace, where we have the Christopher Lloyd villain that's kind of a creepy villain. And then we get into Major Pain that has the alcoholic dad scene. So there's elements of fear targeted towards innocence in elements of his movies that he fully gets the assignment. He understands that. And here, in his first little seedling of a movie, it's the unknown. This is the unknown fear of going into outside of the trailer park, going into space, going into battle. He's questioning his, not necessarily the outcome, but his own ability. So when we see his resume, I might be deep diving way too much when it comes to comparing Major Pain and Dennis the Menace, but as a director, Castle does show little breadcrumbs of what he wants to see out of his creativity. Whether or not they're great movies, it doesn't matter, because it almost tells a story of who Castle is as a director. This is a man that did write Escape from New York, and he did write I Have a Hand in Hook. So these are elements that do add a little bit of fear to the innocence of children, to youth. And I think that is a big part. And it's a beautiful story of revisiting this movie as we grow older, that we recognize the elements of fear. We both have seen all the movies on his resume, and there are little elements here that we can actually go back and say, I get it. I get what Castle is trying to do with this film. He's trying to tell us something here, all the way up to Mr. Wrong, stopping point. We're not going to include that one. But at the same time, this one is, I think, a great origin story to Nick Castle.
You say innocence. I say there's stories of vulnerability. If you think about it, the vulnerability of this movie is that Alex is kind of, it's a story about poverty. Like, these people are impoverished people living in a trailer park up in the hills of California, right? Like, not in the city. His mom works in the diner. There's not a lot of money there, and he feels insecure about that. Then we look at The Boy That Could Fly, which in my opinion is kind of like a analogy for insecurity, autism, social awkwardness, right? No one likes that kid, but he might be able to fly. Who knows? We got it in Tap. You mentioned the alcoholic father in Major Pain, which doesn't feel like it belongs in that movie, but it does show the vulnerability part of it. So yeah, I think that he does look at films where there is a vulnerable character that has some kind of social aggression or anxiety against them, and really uses that to focus their strength as a hero and where they come out at the end of the story. I guess you could say in Tap, it's, Gregory Hines coming out of prison and wanting to make something of himself faster, right? We'll get into that movie when we cover it on the show. But yeah, I really think that is his gift, is being able to tell a story of a vulnerable character that can make the leap into a hero. Okay, so we both like this movie. We both get what Nick Castle is doing. We like the cast. We like the special effects. And I just like the legacy. Like, this is a film that people our age and sometimes even younger want at least some kind of continuation of the story, whether it's a sequel or a reboot. The Last Starfighter, I don't think is done. I've been hearing echoes of remakes and reboots. It had an off-Broadway musical adaptation like everything does. So there is a cult of Last Starfighter. But let's hear what our critics had to say.
The Last Starfighter, and it's the first movie I've seen that offers an explanation for why millions of those video arcade games seem to appear almost overnight all over the country. And it turns out, according to this movie, that they were placed on Earth by representatives of an intergalactic empire who wanted to locate expert teenage space fighter pilots. Now, if you can break the record on a video game, maybe you're good enough to step up into the big leagues beyond the solar system. And I suppose there are probably some parents of video addicts who would like to see their kids maybe spend a couple of orbits anyway. Dan O'Hurley masquerading there behind the lizard makeup as the flight instructor, the old veteran warrior. And the relationship between O'Hurley and his teenage pupil is one of the best things in The Last Starfighter, but the movie is one of those close misses that has some good things in it without ever quite pulling itself together. The video game ideas seem borrowed right out of Walt Disney's Tron, and the battles in space are going to look awfully familiar to anyone who's ever seen Star Wars. In fact, that moving cockpit that helps him to aim his weapons there is right out of the very first Star Wars movie. I liked some of the ideas in The Last Starfighter, but I can't quite recommend the movie.
That actually surprised me a little bit, because Roger seems to be the defender of not only kid-friendly sci-fi movies, but movies that take us to another planet, another world. He always echoes his favorite sci-fi serials of the 50s and 60s. And the fact that this is a groundbreaking technology, normally he is the champion of technology, while Gene is the pessimist of technology. Now, granted, this is 1984, so he's comparing it to Star Wars. We would later see these two compare everything to Ghostbusters when it came out the same year. But that really shocked me. I mean, he didn't say it's a bad movie. It just didn't impress him that much. And he was like, he calls it a near miss. That's an interesting thing for him to say, because this really does feel like something that, in any other circumstance, he would probably recommend. Were you surprised?
No, I wasn't actually, because I haven't seen this review. And honestly, I didn't see it till an hour before we started recording. But this is where Roger, and I've said it before, we both have said it, he's a big sci-fi guy. You have to read him just right on the type of sci-fi he likes. It's a sci-fi movie that's going to make you think, it's going to make you drop your mouth in awe, or it's going to be targeted to little kids. This one fits in between, where it's stuff we have seen before, the effects we've seen before. It's meant for more targeted towards teenagers, and it really doesn't make you think. That is not a Roger type of movie, because this one kind of plays it in the middle of what it wants to be. Yeah, we do get elements. It does feel familiar, even with Star Wars. I mean, it follows the same kind of tropes that I'll get into in a little bit. But this one didn't shock me with Roger, because it doesn't play the notes that he wants. And, it does entice him to say, this is a sci-fi movie. It does have a lot. And I think this one was driven by performances with him, because he does like the characters. But anything on the sci-fi ladder with Roger doesn't play the music that he really likes. So this one didn't surprise me, because it was mainly pure entertainment, and it didn't follow the thought-provoking, and it didn't follow the encouragement for little kids to kind of be the underdog to take the day, if you will.
I mean, but that's the way I see the movie. I guess he didn't see it that way. For me, it almost feels like he's just being antagonistic towards video games, to these arcades, to this thing that's distracting kids from staying home and reading or watching movies or learning more about art and literature. These distracting arcades that are full of juvenile delinquents, right? He sounds, well, who he sounds like? He sounds like Harold Hill from The Music Man and pool halls, right? That's who he sounds like. These damn arcade games. I think, in my opinion, he's being antagonistic towards the movie because of how he feels about arcades. Because the boomers did not like arcades in the 80s, and I feel that reflects in his opinion.
Well, keep in mind, Roger was a video game guy, so he crescendoed.
Later, he was a video game guy in the home market. Once they started playing them at home, he would get really excited about it because that's when he started doing his gift guides and things like that.
Because he did like Tron. So a lot of the video game movies that came out prior to this with the special effects, he was leaning more on the positive side. I don't think he's crotchety yet when it comes to video games. We see that later when we get kind of to The Wizard, I think, and we'll probably review that movie.
Right. Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, let's hear what Gene has to say about it.
And I like the idea. The premise, I think, is terrific. You know, that this is training ground for the big show, the big leagues. I also like where it was set in this little trailer park. You know, that the light is anoints this little kid, and he's a working class kid. The other kids are out, richer kids are out at the beach, and he gets the big journey. I like the relationship between him and his girlfriend. I like the double. I liked every single thing about the picture. I thought the graphic look was fresh, and I enjoyed it too.
Well, I thought it was just kind of a retread. I just didn't. I liked it a little bit. I don't give it a recommendation, but I don't hate it either. I think it was just not quite there.
This
just
is
not
so
quite
much
aggressive enough,
okay. This is
and
so
tightly edited
yeah.
enough.
Oh, I thought that was.
Oh, I don't think so.
I think
it was
this
just
is so much
kind of
more entertaining than the Never-Ending Story, for example. I think you're giving a pass to the Never-Ending Story. I still want to fight that battle one more time because it's made for little kids, and so, well, it's good enough for little kids. This film, I think.
I never said Never-Ending Story was good enough for little kids. I think it's good enough for me, and this isn't good enough for me.
Yeah,
so case closed on those.
Case closed as far as you're concerned.
Yes.
For me.
But don't put words in my mouth.
Okay. The thing that I like is this film. I think is so much better. It's so much better looking, so much more adult and crisp, and characters that you can
and so
relate
much more original for anyone who's never seen a Star Wars picture.
Never-Ending Story is, as you compared it to earlier, is not original either. You know, you compare that to the one with the Dark Crystal.
I can't believe that Gene is on board with this movie. I mean, we just released Starship Troopers a few days ago, and I could not believe that it was Gene that was championing that film and not Roger. Gene got the assignment, and he gets the assignment in this one. Again, it's so off-type for him. But you know what? One of these days I'm going to have to stop saying that because I've said it so many times this season that it's becoming almost a moot point. I can't say that it's unlike Gene because now Gene is agreeing with me on so many of these films. So I think, you know, we just catch Gene in good seasons and bad seasons, but also this is early on in the age of films like this. Give him a few years where we see more films with CGI and retreading the same story. That's when he starts getting really tired of it and done with it. But this was new for him. You could tell that he was excited by the new technology and being able to tell a really good story. And this is, again, the one thing I can appreciate about Gene more than Roger is Gene always recognizes class warfare in movies. He always recognizes the hero from humble beginnings. He always recognizes the differentiations of the struggles of poor people versus rich people. And when you can include that in a film, and I don't know his personal history with that topic, but now that we've done 114 episodes, I see that that is a passion for him, being able to recognize the focus of class warfare in films and using it as a plot structure point. I love that he notices that and he actually says something about it because in this era, the 80s and 90s especially, it meant a lot. It really did mean a lot. Now, that seems like a contrived thing, right? Oh, the poor little rich girl. We're sick of it. But back then, it's something that people really didn't talk about, and he always points it out.
Well, here's where I think both of them are right. And I do appreciate Gene. And I think this one is a shining light to that kind of sci-fi that Gene likes. It's not overly complicated. It doesn't treat the cast as idiots. It doesn't treat the viewers as idiots. This is something very simplistic for Gene for pure entertainment. If you put a 10-year-old in place of Alex, he probably would have hated this movie. Because this is where it does challenge on the entertainment level for Gene, is it does feel recycled for him, but he can have some fun with it. When it comes to Roger, I think, again, like I said before, it doesn't challenge. They both attack sci-fi on two different levels. But I think with the statements given, Gene was proven wrong on what was long-lasting between the comparison of Never-Ending Story and The Last Starfighter. But that's a whole different conversation. But I think when it comes to what Roger's saying, I cannot disagree with him. At the time, I can see it, but at the same time, these are the types of movies that you have to go in with the intent of, will this movie entertain me? Will this entertain the target audience? And Roger isn't the target audience for this movie. It's preteen, it's teenagers, it's not for 40 plus year olds. And even now, with the rewatch, I can see it. I can see where Roger's coming from. But again, I didn't hate it, but I didn't find it perfect. And I don't agree with Gene saying that I liked everything about this movie, because there's obvious flaws when it comes to this movie. But there's no doubt that Gene is right. This is an entertainment. This is purely fun. And that's where I think he really gets and nails the review, to really vocalize to the audience that you should go see this movie. Roger, not so much.
Right. And we are going to have to cover Neverending Story eventually, because that was in the same episode. Other movie on this episode was Electric Dreams, a very underrated movie, essentially about AI, and a computer that gets jealous of his owner and his partner and starts kind of like messing with his life. They covered 3 real interesting 80s films that each are very impactful in what kind of storytelling we'd say in the 80s, especially when it comes to technology and fantasy, And obviously, Gene was not a fan of Neverending Story, according to his review, so we'll have to do that one eventually. There's something I have to say about the Tron Last Starfighter debate. So, when I was a kid, I would honestly say that I probably thought that I liked Tron better than Last Starfighter. Now that I've done that double feature a few times in my adulthood, and I just did it a couple years ago for my birthday, and then this recent rewatch, I really think that I like The Last Starfighter better because it flows. It just moves. And I think now, as a kind of grumpy 44, soon to be 45-year-old man, I want a movie to move. The Tron is visually stunning. I love Jeff Bridges in that character. I love David Warner and his character. I like a lot about it, but there is something so pretentious about Tron and its storytelling. It's got theology, it's got philosophy, it's got all this kind of... It's interesting telling a story like that in a video game world that's meant for kids, but that's not a kid's movie. And I don't know why they call it a kid's movie. I know it's Disney. It had Mickey Mouse on the cover in the old days on that clamshell, but it is like a philosophical analogy for technology and runaway technology. And I don't find it as entertaining as I used to. It's interesting as hell, and it's impressive. But if I want to have a good time with some sci-fi and some CG effects from the early 80s, I'm choosing Last Starfighter. What about you?
I'm 100% with you. And here's kind of where I'll probably get some pushback, but I don't really care. Is Tron, when it came out, is kind of what CGI was in the late 90s, where we get the wow factor. Tron relied on the wow factor. I mean, it's not as entertaining as The Last Starfighter, 100%, because we are anticipating the special effects of Tron. We're anticipating the cycle scene. And honestly, if you go back and ask anybody that's watched it 1, maybe 2 times what you remember about that movie, it's always going to go back to relating to the special effects. Here, it's more about the characters. It's more about the adventure. It's more about the outcome. And it does something that I miss, and I wish more movies would do it, is put that exclamation mark at the end of cheekiness, celebration, to validate this adventure. So, and I think that's what Tron doesn't do, is there's no exclamation mark. It uses special effects to really put that almost a semi-exclamation mark, but it's not memorable. It's not necessarily entertaining. You're 100% right. It's interesting. And as an adult, that would challenge my mind of what the meaning is versus a kid. This one, as a kid, challenged my idea of adventure, of the what ifs. And to me, that is more important than wowing me with what you can do on a movie screen.
Exactly. And Alex fucks off. He's like, goodbye, Earth. You suck. I'm out of here. And fine. He's not leaving much behind. I mean, his brother and his mom, they're going to be okay, right? It's not like the end of Close Encounter where Richard Dreyfuss is leaving his whole family to essentially like starve and figure it out while he goes and plays with aliens. It's a different dynamic. Alex has every right and reason to go and take his girlfriend with him. 100%. Like I feel that he's 100% justified in his decision. I got one hot take about Tron while we're on the subject before we give our final ratings. This is my opinion about Tron as of late. And I'm a Tron fan, right? But I also feel like being a Tron fan gives me permission to shit on it a little bit, right? I think the thing with Tron is that there's a cult of personality with it, that there is this desire to make Tron better than it really is. Otherwise, they would have left it alone, right? The first Tron, not a great film, not a perfect film by any means, but it had a cult of personality behind it that between the video games and the Legacy sequel it got with Tron Legacy, it didn't live up to the hype. So what do? Well, we got to make it better. So we make Tron Ares 10, 12 years later, and it's even worse. But it builds the cult of personality of Tron, where it's like, well, we love the music and we love the special effects and we love the idea of Tron, but no one's making Tron better because I don't think you can. Leave Tron alone. Like, the cult of personality at some point just has to say enough is enough. Meanwhile, Last Starfighter is integral. It's held its integrity for the last 40 years. And if you were to make a Legacy sequel or a reboot or an anime or whatever, there's not enough of it to crack under its own weight if it's not successful, because it's humble and Tron's not. And I think that's my hot take on Tron, is that people are just trying to make it better than it really was, because it wasn't that great to begin.
I love that you said it before me, because I think Tron came way too late in the sequels, because like I said before, it was the wow factor. And by the time they came to the party, the wow factor in current technology with CGI has been exhausted. You can't wow us anymore. And you have to bank on a particular story or lore to really keep us entertained. And even though I felt the entertainment value was there with both of them to an extent, but the wow factor wasn't. So what you're left with is really nothing. And I think that's where The Last Starfighter, it still has entertainment value without really showing an effort to an extent, because it's simple. It tells a story. It has reflections of Skywalker on Tatooine, of going out of that desert but it loses the space opera. It just keeps it simplistic and focuses on characters. And I think that when we compare the two, should tell a tale of what's more important, the wow factor in the moment, or something that tells the story of characters that's going to stay with us. I will remember a character before I remember a special effect.
Okay, so when it comes to, rating our critics, I love Gene's review, but is it a fantastic review? I think I'm more impressed by him liking the movie than I am him actually reviewing the movie, although I agree with all of his stances. So the best thing I can do is say, well, The Last Starfighter for me is a B+ movie, so I'm going to give him a B+ rating on his critique, right? I feel like his defense of the film was all valid points that he was making, but also I feel like whenever those two go after each other for their opinions of other films in defense of their critique for another film, I feel it's kind of a cheap shot, right? Well, it's like, well, you said this about Neverending Story. We don't care about Neverending Story, right? We don't need to do the he said, she said stuff. Just focus on the film at hand and use your defense of it in that moment in that film. So that's why I don't think it's an A review. I think it's a B+.
I think that's fair. Now, when it comes to Roger, this is where it's hard, because a lot of his points I can't disagree with, because I can see it. And understanding that this movie wasn't made for him, but as a critic, you have to understand the intent. And we've talked about that numerous times. But there's something that sparked me a little bit more to kind of feel a lot of disappointment with it, is the comment of, it has a lot of good ideas. Tell me what those good ideas are. Tell me what stands out about this movie. If it's going to be a 2.5 star review, tell me what's stopping this movie from going over the edge. So that is where
the fact that he says it's a near miss. Why is it a near miss?
Because this is something that I think Roger has complete control. Gene is bringing a lot of good stuff to the table. Roger's combating it. Then they end up in an argument about another review, and it really doesn't go anywhere. It's Roger spinning his tires. So there's a level of disappointment. So with that, I can't, out of fairness, give him more than 2 stars.
Yeah, 2 stars is fair. Like I said, I am always the most frustrated with Roger when he's like sitting on the fence, right? When he can't commit to a good review and can't give it a full thumbs down with all his heart. It's that, that moderate view of like, I'm kind of in the middle on this one. And because I'm in the middle, I'm going to take that step back and say, I don't recommend it. I don't like that. He does that a lot more than Gene does. I will say that Gene does have the conviction to be a dick when he wants to be and say, thumbs down, this sucks. But when he does surprise himself in liking a film, he justifies why. I'm surprised I like this. This was good. This was good. I wasn't expecting it. That kind of humility, I think, is a little bit more, admirable for me than the common fence sitting that Roger has on a lot of films.
And this one's the big one where he really leans into where an uncertainty if he should really change his thumbs up or thumbs down. You can almost tell he's unsure going into this review where he's going to go.
Agreed. Okay, well, again, another surprise where I was like, wow, I'm starting to really be a Gene fan here in season 3. And I'm not like watching these reviews in advance and only picking good Gene reviews. I only watched this one yesterday for the first time. And I was like, damn, that surprised me. So yeah, we'll see what all the rest of them bring. Okay, so next week, we are bringing a visually stunning film. Justin has brought something very big from the 90s, and maybe too big. Maybe it was a little bit bloated. We'll hear what the critics have to say about it, but he's bringing 1990s Dick Tracy, written, directed, and starring Warren Beatty, the ultimate ego project. It definitely shows, but how does it hold up? It was a big deal for me when I was a kid. What do I look at it now at age 44? So that's what we'll be doing next week. Are you excited for this one?
I am excited, and I'm excited if you're still going to be a Gene fan after this one, but I'm also curious on your thoughts, so this should be a good episode.
So everyone, please rate, like, review, subscribe to Back to the Balcony on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please like, rate, review, subscribe our YouTube channel, leave comments, and suggest titles for us. As long as it's a film that Gene and Roger covered in their television years and it exists on YouTube and we haven't covered it yet, we'll jump on it. Send us some obscure ones, like we're picking from the pot of movies that we want to talk about. We did make a slight miscalculation last year and did like 2 months of blind spots where we were picking movies that we never heard of or seen before. But I do like the customer suggestions, the listener suggestions, so please send us some more of those. You can find me, Antonio, the host of the Cult Worthy Cinema Podcast, over at thecultworthy.com. You can find my friend Justin Henson over at
themoviewire.com.
And I'll see you next week.
See you next week.